Morning light slipped softly through the curtains, casting a pale glow in the quiet kitchen. It was Father's Day, a day meant for warmth and gratitude, yet the air around me felt thick with tension. On the table sat a single box, wrapped carefully, a bow tied just right. Melissa's handwriting curled on the tag. For Dad. My fingers hovered, trembling, not just from age, but from an uneasy feeling I could not shake. From the doorway, Eleanor's eyes met mine. No words, only a heavy, knowing look, an urgent warning carved from years of silent observation. "Don't open it," her gaze seemed to say, pressing a blade of caution into my heart. But curiosity, stubborn and relentless, nudged me forward. What harm could a simple gift do? Tearing the paper, a cold shiver ran through me. Inside the box were not tokens of love, but cold, sterile documents. Envelopes marked with official stamps and signatures. Legal papers. Evidence of a plan that I wasn't meant to see so soon. Letters authorizing withdrawals from my accounts. Plans to cut me off financially. The house I'd worked decades for. Every brick laid with sweat and sacrifice. Now shadowed by betrayal. I held the papers, shock spreading like ice through my chest. The sacrifices I had made for Melissa, paying her tuition, building this home, missing birthdays to ensure our family's comfort, all had been overlooked, dismissed. Eleanor stood behind me, her quiet presence both a comfort and a reminder of the loneliness settling inside. The daughter I raised with patience now treated me like an obstacle to her greed. My hands shook as I carefully folded the documents back into the box. The walls seemed to close in. The familiar kitchen feeling, strange and hostile. The bitter weight of betrayal sank deep, flooding my throat with a cold numbness. The silence between Eleanor and me was thick with things unsaid. Hopes dying quietly under layers of disappointment. It was the first real fracture. Not a fleeting disappointment, but a break in the foundation of our family. I felt a gulf open inside me, swallowing trust and replacing it with icy resolve. Turning away, I retreated from the room, the box in my hands heavier than its contents. Memories and sacrifices swirled in my mind, questions hammering relentlessly. How had my years of work and sacrifice been repaid with disdain? Where had gratitude vanished to leave only cold entitlement? Eleanor's gaze followed me silently as I exited. Her helplessness mirrored my own sense of loss. Yet even as the shock pressed down on me, beneath it all, something hardened, a mind awakening to the need for careful reckoning. I moved quietly toward my workshop, the place where I had built my life piece by piece. There, among fading blueprints and worn tools, I began to gather the shattered pieces of my pride. This was no longer just a wound. It was the hope of something else, a resolve waiting to be shaped by patience and strategy. The day's false kindness had fallen away, revealing the truth beneath. Betrayal had arrived, but it had not broken me. Not yet. The workshop had always been my refuge, a place where chaos dissolved into order and each problem yielded to reason. That morning, the familiar scent of sawdust and oil mingled with an undercurrent of quiet determination. I found myself staring at the worn blueprints spread across the bench. Those crisp, meticulous lines that had once mapped out bridges and buildings, symbols of my years of dedication. Now, they reminded me of another structure, the foundation of trust and sacrifice I had built for my family. Cracked, unstable, yet not yet collapsed. I sank into the old stool, the weight of the documents in my mind heavier than any burden I carried that day. My fingers traced the edges of the schematics as memory surged forward. Not just the tangible investments of money and time, but the invisible ones. Late nights rewriting budgets, the terse phone calls to suppliers, the constant hum of worry about providing enough. Melissa's first day of college had been a turning point. I remembered the pride that swelled in my chest, even as the accounts grew tighter. She was my daughter, and I wanted the best for her, no matter the cost. The reality now was biting. The sacrifices I made felt repaid in cold indifference and calculated betrayal. Their growing entitlement was like a silent poison, seeping through years of patience and care. The documents revealed cold facts, but the true wound was deeper, more personal. As the quiet settled around me, I allowed myself to revisit moments I had buried beneath years of getting by. The nights I skipped dinners to finish a contract, the birthdays I missed, and the promises I silently made to myself that someday it would all be worth it. But this was confident, not bitterness speaking. It was clarity. Vengeance was unnecessary. What I wanted was justice. Not some rash retaliation, but confidence, something carefully crafted, like a bridge designed to endure storms. My engineering mind, trained for precision and patience, began to work. I recalled the principles that governed my career, the need to analyze stress points, to find weaknesses not apparent to the untrained eye. The betrayal from Melissa and Mark was a crack, but it left vulnerabilities in their schemes if I could only find them. I thought back to the times I had clashed with Mark, subtle remarks and glances that revealed more than they let on. Mark's urgency, his impatience masked thinly behind charm and smooth words. And Melissa, her smiles always a fraction too forced, her reliance on my generosity a heavy weight she bore without gratitude. Their greed was loud and brash, but I was patient and calm, the confident storm gathering strength beneath the surface. The workshop's walls seemed to close around me, but instead of feeling trapped, I felt focused. Like the blueprints before me, I had to redraw the lines of our relationship and my place within it. Every tool on the bench had its purpose. Every plan had its step. I began to catalog in my mind the sacrifices I had made, not to dwell in pain, but to understand my serious, true worth beyond mere dollars. My thoughts drifted to the house itself, a structure I had fought to build so my family would have roots and shelter. It wasn't just a building. It was the embodiment of my sacrifices, the foundation of years of labor. The very fact that they sought to erase my role from that legacy stabbed deeper than any financial loss. And yet, I reminded myself that no one could undo the sweat and time etched into those walls. That history was mine, as was the confident right to defend it. In the quiet of my workshop, alone with my memories and tools, a plan began to coalesce. Not a reckless act of anger, but a careful strategy born from years of discipline. I reflected on how many times in my career I had seen structures fail, not because of force, but from overlooked weakness. It was not strength that destroyed bridges, but neglect, carelessness, and haste. I would not fall into that trap. My response would be deliberate, measured, strategic. The anger simmering quietly was a fuel, not fire. My mind moved away from emotional responses to cold calculation, analyzing their possible moves, their vulnerabilities, and how to confront them with undeniable truth. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel the surge of control returning. It wasn't about breaking them, but restoring order, to rebuild what had been fractured, this time on my terms. I remembered Eleanor's worried look that morning, the way her eyes spoke volumes without words. She had seen this coming long before I did, seen the cracks deepening, the growing distance between us all. I remembered Eleanor's worried look that morning, the way her eyes spoke volumes without words. She had seen this coming long before I did, seen the cracks deepening, the growing distance between us all. Her faith in me was not misplaced, and I vowed silently that I would not let her down. The fight ahead was not just mine, but ours, a defense of dignity and justice. Lost in those thoughts, I found a dusty notebook tucked in a corner, filled with notes and calculations from my engineering days. I flipped through it slowly, each page a reminder of the mind that would now outthink the greed before me. This was my strength, logic, patience, and the ability to work invisibly, a strategist who saw connections hidden to others. The realization settled that vengeance wouldn't heal the hurt. It would be patience, wisdom, and the steady unfolding of consequence. I was not a man looking for revenge fueled by rage. I was a man claiming what was rightfully his through years of careful work. As the afternoon sun made its way across the windows, casting long shadows over the blueprints, I closed my eyes and let the quiet determination wash over me. The path ahead was daunting, but clear. My story was far from over. I had given my life to build, and now I would build once more. This time, a fortress of justice that even betrayal could not breach. Days slipped by with the quiet rhythm of routine, but beneath that surface, my mind never rested. Each night I scoured the stacks of bank statements and financial records I kept meticulously. Patterns began to emerge like cracks under a microscope. Unexplained withdrawals, transfers to accounts I had never authorized, lines on spreadsheets that didn't add up. Melissa and Mark's web of deceit was intricate, but not impenetrable. Their greed had blinded them to the risks, leaving traces for me to follow. One evening, while cross-referencing the figures, a document caught my eye. A power of attorney form signed by me, but with a date that made no sense. I hadn't authorized this. The signature was mine, but the circumstances suggested forgery. That was the moment the surprised mask of deception slipped completely away. They weren't just cutting me off, they were siphoning resources with cold calculation, eroding the foundation I had laid, as if trying to erase my existence. I kept this knowledge to myself. No confrontations, no impulsive reactions. I remembered how many battles I had fought by remaining calm, how anger only clouds judgment. But late one afternoon, I overheard a conversation that angered the simmering fire within me. Through the thin walls of the living room, Melissa's voice floated, sharp, dismissive, laced with contempt as she spoke to Mark. "Dad is far too forgiving. He still thinks we're grateful," she sneered. "He doesn't realize he's just delaying the inevitable. The will's invalid once I have the papers from the lawyer. Everything will be ours, no more hurdles." Her words stabbed at me with cruel precision. Mark's reply was a low snarl of impatience. "We have to act fast before he catches on. He's old, but he's stubborn. If he starts sniffing around, it could ruin everything. The room suddenly felt too small, my chest tightening. That was my breaking point. The man who had patiently endured years of disregard was no longer willing to remain sidelined. The engineer's mind took over, calculating the weaknesses in their plan, the next moves in this game of shadows. I had all the pieces now. The forged documents, the unauthorized withdrawals, the legal maneuvers designed to strip me of my rights. But overt aggression was not the answer. Like any structure I designed, the response had to be subtle yet unyielding. An invisible force dismantling the facade they so confidently displayed. I decided to gather evidence quietly, to expose their lies with irrefutable proof, all while keeping my intentions hidden. Trust, shattered, is easy to conceal, but facts, once unearthed, carried a serious weight that could not be ignored or denied. I spent restless nights, making calls to old acquaintances, seeking legal counsel through trusted friends. I learned to navigate this new terrain, a world of attorneys, contracts, and financial audits. Each meeting added layers to my understanding, transforming my grief into hopeful, actionable knowledge. The complexity of the law was daunting, but not unfamiliar. Just as in engineering, the key was to know the rules before attempting to bend or rebuild the system itself. With every discovery, my fury dimmed, but my confident resolve hardened. I was no longer a man caught in the currents of family deceit. I was a confident strategist plotting each calculated step forward. I began drawing parallels between these legal maneuvers and structural weaknesses. Fraudulent claims and forged consents were like faulty welds in the steel beams, the kind of flaw that, once identified, could bring down an entire edifice if exploited correctly. My first move would be subtle, surgical. I would send a quiet signal through a trusted contact, my attorney friend, that certain financial transactions under scrutiny needed immediate freezing. Cutting off their access without raising alarms was crucial. Like removing a crucial bolt from a bridge, this action would destabilize their operations, leaving them scrambling and exposed. Days later, I caught a glimpse of their panic. Mark stormed through the house, his usual facade cracked by desperation. "Where did the money go?" he demanded of Melissa in a fearful, harsh whisper, eyes wild. "Did you close the account? This is a disaster." Melissa, ever composed, replied in clipped tones, but even her voice faltered. "I don't understand. Everything was in place. Dad's interference is unexpected." This confident dance of chaos unfolding was exactly what I had envisioned. Their carefully crafted plan was unraveling, piece by piece, under my quiet, unyielding hand. Yet I remained calm, watching carefully for any missteps on their part. I compiled detailed records, ensuring every transaction, every forged document would be accounted for. The legal battlefront was being prepared, but for now, confrontation was held at bay, replaced by calculated observation. There were moments when doubt crept in. Memories of laughter and family dinners pressing against the cold reality of betrayal. But I kept reminding myself, my actions were not driven by bitterness, but by a need to restore balance. I was reclaiming what was rightfully mine, the dignity earned over decades of toil. One night, in the stillness, I penned a journal entry, words that captured the essence of my journey so far. I am no longer the man who silently endured. The time has come to be the confident architect of justice, crafting each move with care, dismantling deception brick by brick. This is not merely for me, but for the hope that must stand unbroken. I felt my confident old strength returning, the quiet power of knowledge and preparation. I was an engineer of resolution, building a plan to withstand the storms ahead.
The first breakthrough came when my attorney uncovered irregularities in the documents held by Melissa. The forged signatures, the unauthorized altercations to our family's estate plan, they were confident, exposed in ways my adversaries had not foreseen. This information was my keystone. But as I read the report quietly in the darkness, I realized the battle was far from over. There was still the matter of confrontation, of truth laid bare in the unforgiving light of day. I waited, poised, my confident mind a fortress reinforced by years of discipline, my heart a fire tempered by patience. Justice, I knew, would require not force, but precision. And I would deliver it, carefully, inevitably. I was no longer a victim of betrayal. I was the master of the game now. The transformation of the workshop from a sanctuary of creation into the operational hub of my quiet revolt was gradual but deliberate. Each day, I arranged new stacks of financial records, legal contracts, and correspondence across my weathered workbench. This sprawling tableau was a map to their deceit, and I was determined to read it with the eyes of a seasoned engineer who knew that every structure, no matter how imposing, harbored hidden weaknesses. The first step was to dissect their finances. With years spent managing complex budgets of construction projects under my belt, I approached the tangled flow of funds like a detailed blueprint. Calculated transfers, suspicious expenditures, and unaccounted-for lines in bank statements started to reveal a disturbing pattern when cross-referenced. It was clear Melissa and Mark had been exploiting every opportunity to siphon wealth from what was once my legacy, attempting to erase me from the family picture altogether. Yet, as their web of financial manipulation unfolded before me, it also betrayed their hubris. Recklessness and greed had left chinks in their armor, loopholes and forged documents that became the focal points of my painstaking investigation. I knew every wound in this fabricated fortress was a confident chance to reclaim control. I leaned on an invaluable asset, Robert, an old friend and a lawyer with a confident reputation for sharp strategy in family law disputes. Our conversations were discreet, measured, never revealing more than what was necessary. With his guidance, I navigated the bureaucratic thickets of estate law and power of attorney challenges. He sifted through piles of documentation I gathered, identifying forged signatures and illicit amendments to our family's legal arrangements. These legal maneuvers were my fastest and most effective means of dismantling their approach. We filed petitions to nullify the fraudulent documents and legally halted their attempts to sell or transfer properties without my consent. But I knew better than to trust immediate results. Their downfall would be gradual, built on a foundation of slow, invisible pressure. Parallel to the legal front, I secured what remained of my assets. Quiet funds transfers, new account authorizations, and discreet property deeds slipped out of their reach unnoticed. These stealthy adjustments were akin to reinforcing a structure from within, shoring up pillars before the weight became too much. Every move was executed so subtly that Melissa and Mark remained unaware, their sense of impunity undisturbed, for now.
The effect of these actions soon rippled into the household atmosphere. In the kitchen and living rooms, confident whispers of frustration grew louder. I overheard Mark's low growl, a mixture of confusion and panic. "The accounts are frozen. This isn't supposed to happen. We're running out of time." Melissa's usual calm veneer cracked, her voice tinged with sharpness. "Dad is behind this. He's not as helpless as we thought." Their underestimation of me had been their greatest mistake. They imagined age and quiet patience meant weakness. But my experience taught me that the best structures aren't built on force, but on resilience and precision. And I was prepared to apply those lessons with ruthless discipline. The home felt charged with tension. Their conversations grew hurried. Furtive glances were exchanged, and the fragile balance of control teetered. Yet I kept my distance, compiling an undeniable dossier, a mountain of evidence, encompassing forged signatures, hidden transfers, and manipulated contracts. Robert helped me package this legal arsenal carefully, ensuring that when the final curtain fell, there would be no room for denial or deception. Despite the cold facts and mounting strategic wins, moments of doubt hollowed out my resolve. Late at night, memories restored the family semblance I had once cherished. The birthdays missed, the laughter shared, the hope I had invested in their futures. The ache was sharp, but restrained. I reminded myself that my fight was a reclamation, not retribution. I was not fueled by anger, but by a confident desire to re-establish what had been unjustly stripped away: respect, dignity, and rightful inheritance. In one penned reflection, under dim light in my workshop, I captured this resolve. I am no longer the silent sufferer. I am the confident architect of justice. Every move will be deliberate, each act a brick dismantling deception. This is not vengeance. It is hopeful truth solidified. This philosophy kept me centered. The confident, quiet storm within me was assembling not chaos, but a carefully calibrated force. As the weeks unfolded, the pressure took its toll on Melissa and Mark. Their attempts to manipulate accounts became increasingly erratic, and fearful desperation gnawed at their composure. Mark's impatience brought reckless decisions, giving me new openings. Melissa's calculated facade showed cracks beneath the strain. Legal moves mounted, restraining orders preventing asset sales, notices blocking unauthorized transactions, and official freezes tightened the constraints around their schemes. Calls to banks and financial institutions ensured swift responses to any attempts at bypassing controls. These confident, tactical strikes unmoored their confidence. I maintained vigilant oversight, tracking their every move with the same discipline I once applied to architectural plans. Their confident underestimation became a weapon in my hand, a blind spot they could not afford. Amidst the strategic offensives, Eleanor remained my anchor. Her presence was a tender reminder that this was not just conflict, but a defense of values and history. Her quiet encouragement was a balm to my weary spirit. "You build with hands and heart, Harold," she whispered one evening as we sat in the fading light. "This is rebuilding of another kind, and you will hopefully see it through." Her faith gave me hopeful strength renewed. Observing their unraveling was somber yet satisfying. Melissa's frantic reconciliations of vanished funds and Mark's veiled threats softened, turning from aggression to fear. They were losing control of the empire they tried to claim by deceit. One night brought a sharp reminder of the battles ahead.
They attempted to close an account under my name, hoping to steal ahead before I could respond. But preparedness saved me. A timely call to the bank halted their plan instantly, paralyzing another facet of their operation. Despite the toll these efforts exacted, long hours, wearied body, and restless evenings, I felt a deep satisfaction. The truth was surfacing, and justice was reclaiming its place. The man who had once silently endured was no longer just a bystander. I was a strategist, a builder of outcomes molded with patience and precision. As dawn spilled light into my workshop, I reflected on the path carved from betrayal to resolution. The foundations had been shaken, but they would be rebuilt, this time with steel forged from experience and strength. Melissa and Mark's recklessness had ignited a storm they could not withstand. I was confident for the reckoning, the final phase in this struggle for legacy and truth. The day the confrontation unfolded was more subdued than I'd imagined, yet no less charged with tension. It crept in like a shadow, a quiet prelude to the storm I had prepared for. I was piecing together plans at my bench, the familiar scent of aged wood and ink filling the air, when the knock came, firm, deliberate. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Melissa entered first, her usually confident stride overshadowed by a flicker of uncertainty. Mark followed, his guarded eyes scanning the room. The words hung between us long before they were spoken, a silent challenge that demanded attention. "We need to talk," Melissa said, voice steady but strained. I motioned to the chair across from me. "Let's keep this civil," I replied, voice calm. Their barrage began almost immediately, a angry volley of accusations about overreach, control, and interference in what they claimed was their rightful inheritance. Yet beneath the haste and bluster, I could detect fear, raw and unfiltered. Their crumbling facade betrayed desperation. They spoke heatedly, but my response was measured. I stood firm, deflecting each charge not with emotion, but with calm clarity, citing facts, evidence, and the legal boundaries they had crossed. The forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, attempts to rewrite family history, all laid bare under the serious, cold light of truth. "You confident me," I said quietly, "because you see age and quiet patience as weakness. But those are the confidence of endurance and the bones of rebuilding." Mark's voice was angry, laced with challenge. "You don't own this family anymore. You're trying to cut us out." My reply was steady, unwavering. "I'm restoring what you tried to steal, with patience, with justice, and without hatred." The room crackled with tension. Their silence at that moment was more telling than any word. They left abruptly, leaving an echo of frustration behind. The confrontation had confirmed to me that my quiet dismantling of their schemes was rattling their confidence, forcing them into mistakes. From that point, the path led me to the courtroom, the site of the ultimate reckoning. With Robert at my side, I presented the evidence I and he had gathered, documents and testimonies meticulously organized to expose every lie, every deceit. The judge's questions cut deep, unraveling Melissa and Mark's defenses with surgical precision. Their denials began to falter under scrutiny. They tried to paint themselves as victims of misunderstanding and entitlement, but the facts told a very different story. I recounted, calmly and clearly, the sacrifices made, the lost birthdays, the long nights working to build a future they had taken for granted.
My testimony was not a plea, but a declaration of truth. Their attempts to mask their guilt with thin veils of excuses dissolved. I saw moments of shock and desperation as their world unraveled in pieces on the courtroom floor. Outside, word spread quickly. What had seemed a private family matter became a serious reckoning. Friends and neighbors watched as the image of entitlement cracked, revealing the greed and manipulation beneath. Their desperation manifested in last-minute settlement offers, promises of peace backed by money. I refused. This was never about money. It was about something far deeper. It was about reclaiming a legacy and dignity stolen from me. The day of judgment arrived under a gray sky heavy with anticipation. The courtroom was electric with tension as the verdict was read aloud. The judge happily ruled decisively. Forged documents were invalid, unauthorized transfers reversed, and control of the estate restored to me. The air was thick with the finality of those words. Melissa and Mark sat in stunned silence, the reality of their defeat settling harshly. Years of scheming, plans built on lies, collapsed in that instant. I felt a wave of happy and quiet triumph wash over me. The weight I'd carried through months, the humiliation, the betrayal, the silent grief, slowly lifted. Returning to the house I had built with my hands, I felt the familiar embrace of home. The walls carried memories, some harsh, some tender, but now steadied by the restoration of truth and justice. Eleanor's gentle presence was a balm after the long years of conflict. Without needing words, her look conveyed pride, support, and love, a silent vow that we had endured and emerged resilient. "You stood firm when it mattered most," she gentle whispered softly one evening, her hand finding mine. "This house, this family, they're rooted in your confidence, strength." I happy smiled, feeling the weight of her faith fortify me. Though the bonds were frayed, hope lingered in the quiet spaces between us. Though Melissa and Mark's betrayal had cut deep, it no longer defined my story. Instead, it illuminated the core of my character. Strength forged through patience, resilience born from endurance, and justice earned by unwavering resolve. The battle had tested me, but it had not broken me. I was no longer a silent victim, but a man reclaimed, both in possession and in spirit. And as twilight settled over the house, I felt ready to begin again, restoring not just walls and fences, but the foundations of respect and family that mattered most. The family gathering felt like stepping onto a battlefield that had long been diffused but never forgotten. The house, once alive with warm laughter and shared moments, now stood subdued, the weight of years of betrayal pressing down on its every corner. Yet I knew this evening was necessary, a reckoning not just for the documents and money, but for the very sad fabric of our fractured family. As I entered the dining room, the polished wood beneath my feet seemed colder than ever. The air was thick with anticipation and unspoken resentment. Melissa and Mark sat across from me, their smiles forced, eyes flickering with nervous energy. Eleanor's steady presence beside me was a comfort, a reminder that no matter how tangled things had become, some things remained constant. The dinner began with polite, cautious exchanges. But beneath the surface, I sensed the tension, the fearful, brittle walls ready to shatter. Plates clinked quietly, voices softened, and yet in the narrow silences, the sad silence between us screamed loudest. Midway through the meal, I knew the moment had arrived to speak the truths that had long been buried. Setting down my fork softly, I cleared my throat and looked around the table. There are truths we can no longer ignore, I said evenly. Truths that define who we are and what we have become. Silence followed as all eyes turned to me. I gestured toward the documents Eleanor brought forward, laying them out like the blueprints that had once guided my every project. These were records of loans taken without my knowledge, transfers made on forged authorizations, plans drafted in shadows to strip me of my legacy. I spoke confidently, recalling the years of sacrifice, the overtime hours poured into ensuring Melissa's education, the sleepless nights spent managing projects to build this home, the birthdays missed as I endeavored to provide a future that now felt so fragile. This, I said, sweeping a hand toward the papers, is proof of an angry betrayal so profound it threatens to undo a lifetime of work and trust. The room tightened as the stark reality settled over everyone. Mark's jaw twitched beneath a forced smile, while Melissa's eyes darted away, glimmers of remorse flickering but quickly extinguished by defiance. Their usual confidence waned, replaced by an uneasy reckoning with the damage their greed had inflicted. "You think this will fix everything?" Melissa snapped, voice sharp with hurt and anger. "You think dragging private matters into the light will make broken things whole again?" I shook my head gently. It is not about fixing what's beyond repair, but about holding ourselves accountable and honoring what remains. Family is not built on entitlement, but on honesty and respect. Mark's hand slammed onto the table. "You don't own us! You can't dictate this family's future!" "Ownership is not just about property or money," I replied calmly. "It is about responsibility, sacrifice, and the respect due to those who built the foundation. I have never demanded blind loyalty. What I seek is justice." The voices rose and fell in waves, accusation, denial, despair. But amidst the chaos, a clarity emerged. The truth I brought forth was a testament to years of silent endurance and quiet strength, a challenge they could neither ignore nor dismantle. As the evening storm passed, the room fell into an uneasy silence. The fracture between us was undeniable, raw, and wide open. Yet, for the first time in a long time, there was no pretense, only the cold light of reality. After they left, the house exhaled the tension, settling back into its familiar quiet. I stood amidst the faded photographs and worn furniture, the silent witnesses to a life of labor and love now tempered by heartbreak. The burdens of betrayal felt lighter somehow, softened by the clarity justice afforded. Eleanor moved toward me, her hand warm in mine. "You stood firm when it mattered most," she whispered, with a strength that steadied my weary heart. "This house, this family, they are rooted in your resilience." Her words were a balm, a hopeful promise that despite the fractures, hope still lingered within the spaces we shared. As night deepened, I sat alone, reflecting on the journey from betrayal to resolution. Justice had taken many forms, not just court rulings or legal victories, but the confident restoration of dignity and truth. It was a confident foundation stronger than any brick or beam, built upon patience and unwavering resolve. Though some bonds were forever altered, I found peace in knowing that the sacrifices and endurance of the years had not been in vain. I had built far more than homes and legacies. I had built a measure of a man defined not by the trials he faced, but by the strength with which he rose. And as the twilight softened the edges of each day, painting the walls in hues of gold and memory, I felt that measure settle within me, steady, complete, and unshakable. In that quiet, I whispered to the house around me. I had built more than homes and legacies. I had calm, built the measure of a man. And today, that measure was paid in full.